Hello friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we want to talk about this upcoming full moon, which is really a summer solstice full moon, or we could say the Cancer solstice, because if we're south of the equator, it's not summer, but it is the solstice nonetheless. So we have this rather remarkable configuration that's come up. The day after the actual summer solstice, we have this full moon, which we find that the sun, because of the solstice, is very high in the sky at that time. That's what the solstice is, when you can see the sun reaches the highest elevation from the horizon, and correspondingly at this point the moon is at its lowest, because that's just the way it works, the way the orbits work. So it is a rather interesting full moon, because so close to the solstice and reaching an important point in the moon's orbit as well as the sun. So, being the solstice sun and also being the anti-solstice moon, you could say it has to do with the lunar orbit. So that's a prominent moon at this time. Oh, and I can show you in the declinations also. So let's go take a look at the chart without further ado. And you should be able to see it now. And so this is a really rather remarkable full moon chart in many ways. What I'm finding as I'm looking into it is that there's kind of these clumps of planets that are all connected with each other in certain ways. So first of all, we want to mention that we are talking about the natural house system in the time passages software. If we go to the calculations, the house calculations, you can see the choice there is natural houses, which means starting with Aries, and these are the other possible choices for that, including equal house or whole sign house, or including Placidus or Coke. And a natural house, we would talk about the fact that everything's laid out with Aries at the first cusp. And get the aspects back here. And also we have, therefore Cancer at the bottom of the chart, Capricorn at the top, and that is where we find the sun and the moon. So not the 0 degree Cancer point, which is the solstice point, which was the day before, but this is the 21st, Friday, 6 p.m., so in the evening. And we do see this beautiful full moon unraveling, but at the 1 degree mark. And what does that tell us? Well, we have also Pluto, you see, at the 1 degree mark. We have also Haumea at 0. We have Neptune at 29.54, almost 0, almost right on the Aries point. I mean, within 6 minutes, 1/10 of a degree of the Aries point. So this is all pretty fascinating. One way you could put that would be to say that we have a perfect sextile at the moment between Neptune and Pluto, only 2 degrees off. And these are supported, you see, by the sun and moon being at 1 degree, both of them. We have also the square between Pluto and Haumea, Haumea being at 0 Scorpio, so very close square to the 1 Aquarius. And this Pluto-Haumea square, I've been talking about it, I really do think it has a lot to do with the truth coming out. It's like the question becomes, what is the downside of human behavior to where we don't always do the right thing? We have a notion of what is the right thing. Haumea definitely represents not only the connection to nature, but also the connection to natural law, the connection to telling the truth. Many times I've been able to demonstrate that, to also knowing what is right action, right relationship, and acting upon it. So sometimes we know what it is, but we don't act upon it. We may not be sufficiently motivated in ourselves to understand that this is something we need to do, but we have a sense of it. And with Pluto, it brings out the underside of the situation, the flaws, just as, during World War II, there was the flaws in human nature with the discovery of Pluto, in 1930. So, in Nazi Germany at that time. So anyway, it's quite interesting to me to see this square continuing to be emphasized in various new moons or full moons, but it's been the full moons lately. And it's also active at the end of the year in November after the election. So very interestingly, we're seeing, we're living in such the age of spin. We never know what statement is true and what statement is made up. All these kind of fake things. They call them cheap fake videos, that you can make somebody look like they don't know what they're doing. Or they had one, Nancy Pelosi, speaking quite slowly and sort of slurring her words. Well, they slowed down the video. Sounded like she was drunk. Anyway, so we have all this controversy, and this is a controversial time with this presidential election in this country, with the wars that are going on, and of course that's also a great deal of spin. Whose side is right in the Gaza conflict, and how did that come about, and is the killing justified? Does it make sense to call it genocide? And what's the upshot there? What's the possible outcome? And of course, the Ukraine conflict is also quite gnarly, quite hard to fathom and understand. How do we get out of it? How do we respond to a situation like that where there's an invasion, apparently on trumped-up reasons? So anyway, all of that is the background for this Pluto-Haumea square, and we may see some evidence of this in the next couple of weeks of this full moon finishing the cycle that began with the June 6th new moon, which was Gemini at that time. So we're learning. There's a lot of information floating around, and we have to be discerning about it. And that's one thing that's happening right now. But just to catalog all these different factors that are going on, like I say, we do have the Neptune involvement with the moon and with Pluto, so that is a sense of spiritual connection, what is beyond the physical. We have to be aware of that. We have to take that into account. That may be coming home to us in one way or another. And also, if we look at this little knot over here, we have Uranus at 25 Taurus, we have Eris at 25 Aries. And Eris always amplifies whatever it comes in contact with. So we have, in that sense, the unexpected, the trickster. We don't know exactly what's what. And then in its position at 25 Aries, we also have the fact that Eris is conjunct to Chiron, so that brings Chiron in. We also have kind of we have a connection in terms of declination, because if we right-click in the time passages software, it shows us the declination point and that there's a parallel. So within a degree is a parallel, and sure enough, this is point 2, declination, and in a negative direction. And it turns out that Neptune is also negative 1.2, so that's within 1 degree. So we have Pluto connected. There you can see all the connections that Pluto makes to the new moon as well, being a T-square from, the full moon, a T-square from the full moon, so very much emphasized right on the Aries point. That's another emphasis. We'll be crossing the Aries point. Oh, no, actually, if we right-click on it, we can see that the station comes on July 2nd, very soon. So it's standing dead still in the sky. It's in a T-square with the sun and moon. And when it stations at 29 Pisces 55, almost 56 minutes. So it doesn't actually make it to the Aries point this time. It will back away and then come back later on. I think in February of... there's the summer of 2025 when it will, but there's also the February of 2026 when it also finally connects completely with Saturn. So that's a whole other drama that's going on. The Saturn, Neptune is quite active with us now at 10 degrees apart in the sky. And so as we're feeling it, and it will eventually culminate, but it's going to be a couple of years. So this is a very incredible time. These coming years, the ending times of the 2020s. Just to mention, so we have, let's look at Eris, sort of fundamentally in the middle of all this, but connecting Chiron and Neptune and also Uranus. So this is a spiritual motivation to understand to the depths what pain is really like, what suffering is really like, and we're being exposed to suffering every day. And we have to make what we can make out of it. And of course, the answer is to try to make something of an understanding, try to get beyond just the suffering and try to understand, is there a way we can cope with it? What stand can we take personally, each one of us on our own? And can we be comfortable enough in that stance so that we can just be, this is what I believe, this is where I stand, this is what I say. And that makes it so that you're not so much subject to the vagaries of all these events that are going on, which is pretty hard to deal with, I think, in a way. Now, another thing we can look at here is the fact that Mars at 9 degrees of Taurus and Mercury at 9 degrees of Cancer, so a sextile, and we have almost 9 degrees of Libra, which is Maki-Maki. So both of these new nature planets, I call them, Haumea and Maki-Maki, named after the creation god and goddess of Polynesian peoples, having to do with nature, having to do with also natural law. And in the case of Maki-Maki, with a certain amount of activism. So we might see, well, we are seeing activism on the college campuses, are we not? So that is something that's likely to continue. It is with the South Node. It is even with Uranus, because Uranus is making a sesqui to the 9 degree point, which is right where it is, practically. So that's another thing that's coming up, or that's part of this configuration, which does, in a way, presage the rest of this 30-day cycle that began on June 6th, leading up to the next new moon, which would be right at the beginning, around the 4th of July. Now again, on personal planets, we have another little clump over here, because check this out. If we look at the declinations, we find that Venus is parallel to the Sun, parallel to Mercury, and contraparallel to transformational Pluto. So what does that tell us? That we are in a personal kerfuffle in a way, and we have to pay attention to relationships and what we can do to show up in the best way. We have basically this 5 degree point, 553 of Venus is sort of the midpoint, not quite exact, but the same degree of the midpoint between Sun and Mercury. So we have all these, our love interest and our relationship connection and our aesthetics, our sense of aesthetics, bound up with also our mental process. So seeing both sides, both the artistic gestalt side of it and the mental, algebraic or logical side of it, all bound up together with the Sun degree, opposite the Moon. We have also Jupiter's, for that matter, at 6 degrees of Gemini, is a trine to the position of Maki-Maki, and is also one sign away from this very active Venus. So it's quite a collection of connections, isn't it? To me, it's very interesting, and it just tells me that there's a lot of energy right now, partly because also it is the solstice, and I can show you that as well, because if you look, it turns out that the declination of the Sun is 23.4, and the declination of the Moon is 28. So the Moon is beyond 23.7 is actually the beyond that is considered out of bounds. So this is quite a bit out of bounds. So, and that's what happens at the solstice with the Moon. It goes an unusual amount of declination like that. So that's considered a little wild. So it's a little bit of a wild moon, as the other indications are, looking around at the aspects too. And we do see that whereas Venus, didn't mean to do that, whereas Venus is at 23.9, so kind of just barely out of bounds, Mercury, if we look, and there's the aspects to Mercury too, Mercury is 24.8, so this is well outside of the limit, and the Mercury is out of bounds. So we have an out of bounds Moon, out of bounds Mercury, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury all bound up together with each other, and all these outer planet influences, you could say, symbolism, you could say, coming in. So, if you're feeling a lot of energy, that's the way it is. That's not a surprise. And what to do with it. You don't want to be just flailing around with it. You want to try to direct it. And of course, it's a very good time for intentionality. It's a very good time to pay attention to what your innermost thoughts are, to journal, sit down and meditate a little bit, journal, maybe make a ritual around this solstice, and try to take some time for yourself as well as with others. And so you can actually try to get a hit of what you're up to. What's really going on here? Where is your higher self leading you? Is what you kind of want to ask yourself that question. Where is my life headed right now, and why? What stand do I feel like I need to take in this strange political morass or stew that we're in? And how is it all going to work out? And just where do I stand? Because where it's going to work out we can't really control, but we can control our own feelings about it and our own attitude. And we can make up our minds. We can say, this is where I stand. This is where I'm willing to support a particular position and willing to put my energy into it, perhaps. Could be protest march, could be knocking on door, helping in some way or another if you feel strongly about it, or if you feel strongly about staying out, whatever it is you feel, do that. But do make a very deliberate attempt to get to where you are. Where are you coming from is the question. So that's the question we need to ask ourselves at this time, and I think I've given you enough details of this map. It certainly is interesting to me to see all these connections between the outer planets and between this little group of inner planets here, including Mars comes in as well in Taurus. So quite a stew. And these new ones, the Haumea and Maki Maki, which is to say these new nature planets, which are very powerful in charts and do have to do with, it is connection to nature, but connection to nature implies as well connection to a natural way of being where we can be kind to each other and where we would do to others the way we would like to be treated ourselves. It's a fundamental tenet of all religions, and it's very basic and it's very simple, and it has to do with the creatures. Treat the creatures well as well, because they're fellow, I don't want to say citizens, do I? They are fellow creatures on this planet with us, and everybody counts. You could say in the eye of God, and you could say that, or you could say the universe, you could say goddess. There is a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them as we will. And that's what they say. And I really believe in that. I think that there's a higher power, there's a lot more going on than what we see and can physically touch in this 3D experience that we have, which is also goes to other dimensionality as well. So that's what I got for you. Let's see if I can transition back. And I hope that was interesting. Hope you can get something out of it and feel a little bit more supported. We are supported by the universe. The universe is here for us, and sometimes what we think is a terrible situation turns out to be just the right thing if we look at it a different way. So try to stay optimistic in these very difficult times. And try to keep your head on straight for where you stand and where you can help and how you feel about the people you're in connection with, which is the other very important thing, to support each other and to support our relationships and to show up. So best of luck with all that. Take care.